very easy to connect and start a new business. So we don't find that as an issue there. So we do encourage companies to think global right from the start, right? To have that global DNA right from the beginning.
Thank you. So, Joanne, maybe shifting to you. So what can the U.S. government do in this instance? I mean, I want to expand. I have a hot company growing. What can you do for me or for us?
Well, I think there is an ongoing lack of perhaps familiarity with the resources that are available at the federal level, well, and the state and local level as well, to entrepreneurs and startups right here in the Valley. We are so fortunate to have so many resources. Sean alluded to many of them in his previous talk that are here. As far as what we do, we do a lot of outreach to startups. We do a lot of outreach to incubators because our feeling is that those companies, while small today, need to be thinking internationally from the outset, and they may not necessarily be tapping into the U.S. Department of Commerce and Services next week, but they might very well need them in the next 18 months. And things like am I developing a product that might perhaps have a different set of standards that would apply in Europe? If I'm developing a pharmaceutical product, or even if I'm packaging and testing an electronics product, I need to make sure that it's appropriate and can be able to be exported to the European market. So for us, it's very important to do a lot of outreach to make sure that companies are aware of the things they need to keep in mind as they're developing their companies, and to also raise awareness of the types of services that are very low cost or free in many cases to the firms. And we do a lot of work to standards, helping companies understand European standards, introducing companies to potential international partners in Europe, and also customers.
And you do that all from your office here?
Yes, so we have our office here in like I said, is in downtown San Jose. But if we have a company that is looking for a business partner in Germany, then we turn to our colleagues based out of the embassies and consulates around Germany, and they will assist in the partner identification and screening, market research, and that sort of thing for the U.S. companies.
All right, then, jumping over the pond, what can you do for us too? Obviously, because we're about the U.S. resources and that thing of yours.
I suppose where kind of a lot of the complexity comes in, or where a lot of difficulty companies need to put feet on the ground and make an investment. For startups and for companies where maybe resources are limited and time is limited, it's important, I think, to manage and get an understanding of. As I had said, Europe is one block, but it's made up of building blocks, and it's a matter of understanding where are the differences between different countries. So things like, for example, the whole labor laws and labor legalities around employing people and hiring employees will vary an awful lot throughout Europe. So I think in the first instance to have an awareness of that, and then to also look at the different local governments such as Ireland or Netherlands or others and the incentives that might be on offer. We will always encourage companies, I think, who are looking to go abroad, particularly for the first time, to take as much advice on that as possible, and to certainly not to be afraid to talk to government. And often I think, forewarned is forearmed in terms of just understanding your risk profile when you're entering a new location, and also kind of what the risk profile might be if you need to leave for whatever reason.
And maybe Vitaly, going back to you, so you were talking earlier about opportunities, especially with relevant teams and things like that. So obviously we're all familiar with some of these two European development teams who are pretty awesome, at least we're here, in the European Union. And so how do you check this? I mean, do you find a leader? Do you find someone who, from one of your companies or your company particularly as well, who you then rally around your European operations, or do you rather see the problem target a particular economy or a particular maybe customer, and then go into that? How do you do that? How do you weigh these things against each other?
I think a good segue to that would be kind of putting a bow tie on the previous question stage, quote unquote, is defined in different ways. So at the very beginning of a technology startup, it's not a service company, but a product company, you have very kind of tight rhythm of things happening. You might raise your friends and family round, which will give you enough to create a prototype. You might raise your first institutional round with professional investors, which might give you first access to gain users to consumer application or getting to first revenue to kind of prove out the business model. Then mindset models. Right? So for instance, all this outsourcing model, going abroad organically or soft landing in other markets, I think it still applies for these stated growth companies. So what has worked best for us is thinking about partnership models. We call it cross-border partnership. So instead of thinking of, I'm going to outsource this to somewhere in a different country, or I'm going to soft land, or I'm going to grow organically into this market, the way we've structured this is let's find a more appropriate partner in a different location, and let's work together and leverage the capabilities of this cross-border partnership, whether it's access to the market or access to IP or access to talent or access to capital, working with someone who's thinking in similar terms and looking at a similar market in a different country and actually creating a partnership is actually more useful. Right? So building on the earlier example that I was giving you, this fuel cell company here from the Bay Area is partnering with a Swedish company, also a startup, and they're doing joint R&D, and they're raising capital here in the US and also in the European Union. They're leveraging talent from both sides of the ocean, right? And they're creating a much stronger company. They're actually focusing from a market perspective in developing countries. Right? So the technology they're developing is for developing countries. They're partnering in the IP, in the creation of the company, and so on and so forth. And that model actually, in our experience, works much better than actually thinking as a corporate, thinking, oh, I need to build a team in Europe, or I need to have an office in Europe, or I need to build this kind of organic. We find that the partnership model works much better from a practical point of view than the traditional thinking.
Joanne?
I was just going to add to that. I think that Fernando makes a very, very important point, and that is that, maybe having a partnership first is a much lower level of commitment, particularly for small companies who are looking to, assess the market. Well, hopefully they would have already assessed it prior to having engaged the partner. But having done that, engaging the partner is a much lower level of commitment. And also, as has already been stated here, establishing a company and getting a track record going in the U.S. first is really very, very critical. Having a company here, having your IP established here, having the IP protected here, is very, very important. Because of course, patents are territorial. You have a U.S. patent, it's not good outside this country. If you want to protect your patent, if you want to file your patent in Europe, you need to do so there. So it's very important to have the secret sauce, I think, maintained here. And we talk to a whole lot of companies that get into a lot of trouble. They're very, very eager to be international, be global, and they end up, losing their shirts. So I do think that's very important to be established here with a solid track record first.
Vitaly, maybe going back to